For today's short meditation, let us turn our pages to Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 to 10. And we'll be focusing on verses 4. As we see in Daniel chapter 6, it talks about how Daniel is in the den of lions and how God rescues him. But here I would like to focus on verse 4, which emphasizes on how faithful Daniel was. And how about we today? Are we faithful to God? Are we faithful like Daniel was faithful? You know, there was once a young man who was being interviewed for an administration, for a small position in a business firm for administration. And he had a neat appearance and he had made a good impression to the owner of that business firm. And when he also prepared an very good, excellent resume of him. And he has listed in his resume and he had his recommendations from his pastor, from his Sunday school teachers and other church deacons and everyone for the references. And the person who's the owner of this business firm who went through his recommendation, he appreciated his recommendations and he appreciated his resume. At last, the business owner who was going through his resume said, I appreciate these recommendations from your church friends, but what I would really like is to hear from someone who knows you on the weekdays, not on the weekends. So when we see the recommendations were usually from the church and the deacons from the church and the pastors and the Sunday school teachers, we see these are the occasions where he spends his entire weekends and only his church activities. But what about his weekdays? When he goes to a business, it is about the daily basis how he works, not on a Sunday being a Christian in a church. Sometimes it's like, are we a Sunday Christian or are we the everyday Christian? It's like we need to be like Christ-like in our day-to-day life, not just in Sundays. There is a huge difference being ourselves, living ourselves as Christians every day, not just when the Sunday comes, not only on Sundays. So similarly, how this business owner come across this interviewing person, that how he is in weekdays, not on weekends. Similarly, it is applicable for us. How are we on our day-to-day basis, not just on our Sundays coming to church and praising God, but how are we? How is our appearance? How is our attitude in our everyday life? We see the principles we carry on Sundays should be carried on, not only on Sundays, but on every day. Here we see Daniel was an ideal model that we can take in relationship with God and man. He had a good example we can learn from Daniel. He did not live a double standard. He did not live to please people. He did not have that two-faced attitude in him. Rather, we see his daily conduct was very consistent with his spiritual values. He never forgot to pray. Every day he spent time with God. He had a very high spiritual values, and he never tried to hide it from the other people. He never tried to hide it from his friends. And when we see in verse 4, we see his enemies try to find some charges against him, trying to find something to complain about, trying to find some fault in him. But with sadness, they don't find anything. We see in verse 4, at this the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could not find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt or negligent. We see how Daniel was carried along with his administrators and government officials. When they tried to find charges against him, they couldn't, because he had good values. His attitude was very fair. He never showed negligence in his work. He never had any corrupt businesses in what he was doing. Rather, he was faithful in everything that he was doing. And he had the right values with his neighbors and with God. And we see he walked this world in very good harmony with God and man. That's why even when they tried to find a complaint, tried to find some fault in him. They couldn't. And sometimes we need to take this example from David. Like sometimes we don't need to impress other people or to please others, but rather we should try to be same throughout the day. We should not change ourselves just because to please others, but rather we need to look to God. We need to try to please God, not men. And we need to focus on how David upholded his values throughout every day, not just on particular day. So us today, what kind of differences could we examine ourselves? How do we perform on Sundays, or how do we perform on every day? So we need to start performing ourselves same the every day, not just very spiritual on Sundays and other days just trying to please others. That will become hypocrite. There's a quote which says, a hypocrite is a person who is not himself on Sunday. So it's like we need to be ourselves, true to ourselves, true to our God, true to our fellow beings throughout every day, not just on a particular day. So let us find and learn from Daniel that let us try to uphold our values spiritually and humanitally, to stay the same in the Lord, not to just to change our faith, not to change our values in order to please others, but in glorifying God. That's what Daniel did. What he did was glorifying God in everything that he did. So we too need to glorify God in everything that we do. Amen.